How's it going? It's me, Hub, and I am back to talk to you about another comic book. So, all this month, I am discussing comic books that are classic Halloween-ish themed tales. And I've been having a lot of fun doing it. Now, the one I'm talking about today is a bit of a stretch to fit into any of the categories that I just talked about. But I think it does qualify. Probably the biggest stretch would be to call this comic book a classic. I actually really liked it. It's definitely Halloween-ish themed in a number of regards. It came out later than I think any other comic book that I'm talking about. The cover date to this is February 88, so it probably came out in October of 87. So past the end of the Bronze Age by pretty much any definition. But fuck it. This one's for me. We are going to talk about Sledge Hammer #1. The licensed Marvel property that was a tie-in to the TV show Sledge Hammer. Let's just take a look at that cover. It's a thing of beauty, isn't it? Now, you can see in the corner there is Satana, sort of. There's a character in this book that is called Satana who looks like Satana, but what this issue presupposes is that in the Sledgehammer universe, which the issue is kind of cagey as to what extent it is the rest of the Marvel universe, Satana is not necessarily the devil of the daughter, but maybe in addition to being the devil of the daughter, daughter of the devil, she is also a Elvira-like TV show host who is a character who is played by a bunch of different actresses, which kind of makes sense and I think is pretty clever. So, I don't want to talk too much about Satana because she might come up later this month in another one of these videos. Just saying she might. She will. I'm going to talk about Satana later. So, look forward to that. Anyway, let's talk about Sledgehammer a little bit. When I was growing up, we had I think 8-inch black and white television that mostly got PBS. We could sometimes get the local affiliate station for NBC. We were allowed to watch a half hour of television a day. We would alternate, my sister and I, between 3-2-1 Contact and reruns of The Jeffersons. Then when I turned like 9 or 10, my parents got divorced and I lived with my dad. And he won a big screen color TV in a raffle, and our grandfather got us cable, and it was just total immersion. It was a magical time to be a young me in a lot of regards. Confusing, certainly, but one of the shows that I fixated on, because it had just started, was a show called Sledgehammer. Sledgehammer, if you don't remember it, it only ran for 2 seasons. I don't think it was that popular. It is bizarre that there is a Marvel tie-in for it. But it was a parody of Dirty Harry movies. And kind of the tropes of that would run through shows like Hunter and things like that. I had never seen any of the Dirty Harry movies. I still have only seen like 1 or 2 of them. Not a huge fan. I didn't understand the tropes that it was parodying, but it was like a Airplane style parody where the jokes were just so dense and so over the top, and there were so many of them, and I loved this show so very much. Sledgehammer was, as I said, a Dirty Harry type cop. He had a gun that he was in love with that he slept with on his pillow next to him every night that had pearl handles with a little sledgehammer carved in it. His catchphrase was, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing," which he generally did not. He would shoot jaywalkers and stuff because they were lawbreakers. He was an idiot, and most of his cases would get solved by his partner, who was a tough, smart, but sensitive cop named Dory DeRoe. And she was great. So the structure of the show was generally not that dissimilar to Inspector Gadget, if Inspector Gadget was Dirty Harry and Penny was his partner. He would generally get the credit and had a reputation as being a tough, smart, over the top, but gets results loose cannon cop, but she did all of the work and actually accomplished everything. I haven't revisited the show. It may not hold up. I think I watched a couple episodes about 10 years ago and was like, oh, this actually is pretty good. But I don't know, man. I liked a lot of weird shit 10 years ago. Maybe it doesn't hold up, but we are not here to talk about the Sledge Hammer TV show more than I just did. We're here to talk about the Sledge Hammer comic book, and like the Sledge Hammer TV show, this comic book is better than it has any goddamn right to be. I really enjoyed it. It is a dense read. The jokes generally land in the same way they would in the Sledgehammer TV show or an Airplane-like movie, where, you know, probably about 70% of them are really, really dumb. And maybe the other 30% are too, but there's just so many of them coming at you so fast, and some of them work, and it is a really fun time to read. It's written by Jim Salicrup, who was a name that I had seen on a lot of comic books. I haven't actually read that much stuff by him. He mostly worked for licensed properties as a writer. He was an editor for a number of books, including a very lengthy run on Amazing Spider-Man. He's the guy who hired Todd McFarlane. He worked for Marvel Comics for, I think, like 30 years. He started when he was 15 as a gopher and worked his way up to editor. But for writing credits, he's probably best known as a writer for licensed properties. He wrote the A-Team book. He wrote the 80s Transformers books. And he also wrote a couple of licensed product tie-in comic books, including The Adventures of Kool-Aid Man and The Adventures of the Nestle Quick Bunny. We might have to cover those at some point. I might actually have to do a whole series on licensed products because I love a lot of licensed property tie-in comic books. They are legitimately some of my favorite comic books. Most notably right now I'm thinking of ROM and Micronauts. But there were a ton of them that were actually really, really good. This book is good. It seems weird that I have to emphasize it that way, but it's good in the same way that Sledgehammer is good. It is fun. It plays with language. It plays with the format of the comic book a lot. There are a few different exchanges between the editor and author. The first one has like 8 different boxes where the editor and author are making fun of each other in a way that really does set the scene and the tone for this comic book. The issues that I do have with it, and there are some, are primarily it is clumsy in the way that it is set up. The plot is a little bit denser than it needs to be. It works for this book, but almost every page has an 8 or 9 panel grid, and there is a ton of dialogue within those. The dialogue works. It actually establishes characters pretty well, and the jokes are the kind of funny that they should be. But it's a lot. It's a pretty dense read for a Sledgehammer comic book. The general plot is, as I said, Satana is a Elvira-style movie host for TV shows. And she is the 4th Satana because they just keep getting murdered. Actually, she's the 3rd one, sorry. She's the 4th one if you count the actual Satana. But Satana, the character, took over as the host after a guy named Vincent Van Gool, who was a Vincent Price type host, was getting low ratings. And then ever since they took over, the Satanas keep getting murdered in the style of the horror show that they are about to host. The first one gets, I think, bitten by, like, her neck gets slashed and she was about to do a vampire movie. One of them gets smothered with bandages when she was about to host a mummy movie. And the current Satana, who is named Stephanie King, get it? Like Stephen King, only Stephanie. They try to murder her a bunch of times. The first one is a Norman Bates type situation where the guy like Norman Bates tries to murder her in her shower. That's when the police get involved, and then there's a Freddy ripoff, a Jason ripoff, a Christine, the murderous car homage going on. And they're all handled pretty well. And the book is pretty fun. The artist is great. It is Alex Saviuk. And he is like a prototypical working artist. He does great work. I don't mean that as any kind of a detriment to him. It works really well, but he also has like worked as a storyboard artist, and he's bounced around the industry a bunch. He worked as a comic strip artist. He was the primary penciler on the Spider-Man comic strip that ran in newspapers for like 30 years, which I gotta check some of those out. For the most, like up through 2003, they were written by Stan Lee, and up until a couple of years ago, they were inked by Joe Sinnott, which is amazing. Larry Lieber's been writing it since 2003, but yeah, he did a ton of, he did that for like a 20 or 30 year run, and has also worked on Amazing Spider-Man and has bounced between Marvel and DC for quite a while. But the art is really clean and very, very much what it should be. It gets cartoony, but not too cartoony. It conveys humor really well. The motion between the panels is really good. As I said, really the only issue I have with it is that it is pretty dense. They probably could have trimmed 2 or 3 of the horror parody murder attempts out of it, and it still would have maybe read a little bit better, or stretched that over a few issues. But it does kind of mimic the pace of the joke telling of the TV show, so it works. Anyway, I am going to give a wholehearted recommendation to Sledge Hammer #1 from Marvel Comics in 1987. It's pretty great, and it's definitely worth checking out. And if you're looking for a lighter Halloween read, see if you can find it. You can probably find it in a $1 a quarter bin somewhere. They, I think, only made 2 or 3 issues of it, which means I may have a full run of Sledge Hammer comic books. And yeah, if you've watched the Sledge Hammer TV show recently, let me know if it holds up. If it doesn't, don't let me know. I want to cling to my illusions that not every piece of media from my childhood is utter garbage. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us. We will be back soon with another Halloween classic, like the Sledge Hammer comic book. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.